Hey guys, I just want to take a few minutes and I want to introduce you to something, if you aren't already familiar with it, called the HTTP protocol. And this is a really important topic to understand well if you're going to get into web development. So this is one of those things you want to just take the time to make sure that you have a good understanding of this right at the beginning of your career as a web developer. HTTP protocol is something that you can understand quite quickly. It's quite a simple thing. So what is a protocol? If I just Googled for define protocol, and what I get back is, in the context of computers, a protocol is a set of rules governing the exchange or transmission of data between devices. In other words, if one computer wants to communicate with another computer, the protocol defines how those two computers will communicate with one another. So as you know, with computers, everything needs to be very clearly defined, very formal, very specific. Okay, so a protocol will define exactly what messages you can send from one computer to another and exactly what type of responses will come back. So what is the formatting of the messages, what words need to be used, what kind of codes need to be used in order for the two computers to successfully communicate with one another. And what is HTTP? Well, HTTP is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and it is the protocol of the internet. So this protocol defines the messages and the formats that are used for your web browser to communicate with a web server, and for that web server to send responses back to your web browser. So when you're browsing the internet using your web browser, what's happening is your web browser is communicating with the web server using the HTTP protocol, and the web server is responding to your web browser using messages defined by the HTTP protocol. So there are really two main commands that your web browser can send to a web server, and they are get and post. Put and delete are less commonly used, and I'm not gonna cover those now, but you should just be aware of them. And there are a few other little ones that are even less commonly used. These are the commands that your web browser can send to a web server. Get is used if you want to get a web page. Okay. Post is used if you're completing a form on a website and you hit the submit button to submit that form. That data is sent using a post command, and you can think of it like in the old days, if you were going to send a form, you would fill out a paper-based form, you'd stick it in an envelope, and you'd put it in a post box, right? And that's the same kind of idea here. You're posting that form data to the web server using a post command. Now, the commands that you send to the web server and the responses that the web server sends back can include additional details, okay? And those additional details are called headers. So there are many different types of headers, and if you have a look at the HTTP commands that are going messages that are going backwards and forwards when you're browsing the internet, you'll see that the average response back from a web server has maybe a dozen headers. And it's really good to just be very conscious of those headers that are coming back, and to Google them and to understand what those headers mean, because this is just important for you as a web developer. But I'm just going to introduce you to three which are very common ones: the host header, the content length header, and the content type header. Now, there are also response codes. So when you send your request, your get or your post request to a web server, that web server is going to respond to you, and that response is going to include a response code. And the response codes are grouped into 4 groups, and those groups are the 200 response codes, the 300 response codes, the 400 response codes, and the 500 response codes. That is, from 200 to 299 are the 200 response codes, and so on for the other ones. So if you get a response back from when you send your command to the web browser, to the web server, if you get a response code back that is between 200 and 299, that means that it's successful. In other words, if you are requesting a web page and you get a 200 response back, that response is going to include the web page that you requested. So the 200 response just means it's successful. The 300 to 399 response codes mean that the web page has moved. It's called a redirect. Okay, 301 means that the web page has moved permanently. and 302 means that the web page is moved temporarily. If you get a response code from 400 to 499, that means that there was an error, and the error was your fault. So that's a client-side error. So for example, 401 response code means access denied. In other words, you requested a web page that you're not authorized to view. A 404 is page not found. So that means that you've requested a web page, and that web page does not exist on this web server. A 400 is like a general purpose client-side error. So for example, if you're submitting a form, and maybe the form has an email address, you need to put in your email address on that form, and the email address is an invalid email address, you might get a 400 response code. And the 500 to 599 response codes mean a server-side error, and that means that there was a problem on the website. Maybe the website crashed, maybe the website ran out of disk space, or maybe there was a bug in the website code, and that's a server-side error. Right, so now let's look at a practical example. So I've created this web page. Okay, so let me just start right from scratch. Right, so I've created a little sample website to do this little demo. Okay, and it is hosted on a host einsight.co.za, and it is at path HTTP protocol. That's what I've called my little demo website. And you'll see what comes back is a web page. Okay, so what's come back is some HTML, and that HTML has got a title, it's got some text, it's got an image, okay, and it's got a link, right? It's the Polar Bear Conservation Society, and I can sign up and join the society. Okay, so if I click here, I get a sign-up form, right? And I can put in my first name, my last name, my email address, and you can see then there's a button here, and this button will then allow me to post this data through to the web server. And you'll see that if I put in an invalid email address like this, I'll get an error back from the web server, and that's a HTTP error 400 because I put in an invalid email address. And I've also made it just so that we can see an example of a 500. I've just made it that if I put in a valid email address, okay, and if I put a star on here, then that just simulates a 500. Okay, so that's just simulating server-side error. And if I put in a valid email address, then I get a nice thank you page, thank you for signing up, with the details that I entered. Okay, so let's see, I just want to show you. So the one thing I just want to show you is that you can use the inspect option here, and if you go to the network tab, okay, and you just request this page, you can actually inspect the HTTP messenger, the details of the HTTP request and response. Okay, but it doesn't really, even though you can sort of view source here, right? I want to just show you kind of more real time what is actually happening between the client and the server, between your browser and the web server using Telnet. Okay, so I'm going to basically do using Telnet. I'm going to do what the web browser did, and just let you see the actual kind of flow between the web browser and the web server. So this is a tool called Telnet. It's installed on it's a Unix tool. You can install it also on Windows. Okay, very, very good tool for you to have installed, and it just allows you to connect to a server and just send raw commands through to a server. So I'm going to use Telnet to connect to this web server. Okay, so the way that I do that is go Telnet, I put in the host name. Now it just needs to be the host name, just like that. And what is the port? Well, this is the HTTP port, port 80. Okay, and you'll see what Telnet has done is it has connected me to this web server at 154.0.168.122. That's the IP address of my web server. Okay, and I'm now connected to my web server, and it's waiting for me to send a command. Okay, so I'm going to send the command to get this web page. That's what the web browser did when I basically do this, right? I'm going to send this command across, and this is how the HTTP protocol looks. Okay, so first of all, I type the command, which is a get. Okay, and then I need to type in the path of the file, the web page that I want to get, and that's this component here. Okay, and then I need to say what version of the protocol am I using? HTTP 1.1. Right, and I type and enter. Now I can add headers. Okay, so as I'm typing, this data is going through across to the server. It's all being received by the server. And the header that I need to add in order for this GET request to work is I need to add the host header. Okay, and the host header needs to be this host name. Right, and why is this host header required? Well, you can Google it, what the host header means, but the reason why this host header is required here is because I'm using a shared hosting provider at AfriHost, and there's multiple websites hosted on this particular server. So when this request is received by this server, it needs to know which website it must send it to, because there are multiple ones running on this shared hosting server, and this host header tells it that it must send this request to the einsight.co.za website. And how do I tell it that I'm now finished entering the command? I put in a blank line. Okay, and you can see that what's happened when I put in the blank line, the server recognized that the request was complete, the request component was complete, and it immediately responded to me. Okay, using the same HTTP protocol. And here's the response that it has sent back to me. Okay, so what is that? How has it responded to me? Well, the first line, it has said, this is HTTP protocol 1.1, and it has sent the response code, okay, 200. In other words, this was successful, and a short little message to describe this response code, which is okay. And then you can see it has also sent a few headers, just to give a little bit of additional information about this response. It has sent the date, so this is the date on the server. It has sent the server type, server type is Apache. It has sent the last modified date of this file. So the last time this file was modified was today at 3:52 p.m. Okay, it sent this accept ranges. You're going to have to Google this. I don't know what this is. Okay, this header. It has sent a content length header, and what this is saying that the content, right, the actual content that is responding to me with this HTML content is 836 bytes long. And this is really useful for the web browser, because the web browser will receive this data, okay, from the web server. It will stream across one character at a time until it's done, and because the web browser knows that it's 836 bytes long, it will know when this response is, when it's received the full response, okay, and it could put up something like a progress bar, and it could, it could show you, the web browser could show you as it's receiving the response, right? So this is basically just telling you how long is the response, and then the content type. So this response is of type HTML, text HTML, and you'll see that there's multiple different types of content that you can that a web server might return to you. For example, audio content or video content, and it would then pop up a little video player. And then here you go, here's the response. And if I take this response and I save it into a file, so here I've got a little file which is sitting on my desktop, And if I open up this file in my browser, so if I go to my desktop, let me just open this up on my desktop so that you can see it. There's the little file on my desktop. Okay, and the image hasn't rendered, but you can see that it's actually the same HTML. Okay, that's come across. You can just imagine that the image was there, right? Okay, so basically I've gotten the same response through. So that's HTTP GET, and let's just do a quick post. Okay, so when I filled out this form, okay, and I clicked sign me up, okay, this now did a post command which included the data in my form. Okay, so let me just show you quickly how that looks. Okay, so here's the post command. Okay, so I'm just going to do that post command using telnet. Okay, telnet to my server. I'm now connected to my server, and I'm going to issue that command, the HTTP command, just like my browser would do. Post, and then the path that I'm posting to. So this is the path here that I'm posting to. Okay, and it's HTTP version 1.1, right? I need to have my host header. Okay, now what I need to do, because I'm sending data to the server, I need to tell it what the content length is. Just the same way when it sent a response to me, it told me what the content length was. And this content length is 86 bytes. And that's quite easy to work out because one character is 1 byte. Okay, so this is 56 characters long. Okay, so the content length is 56. And then I also need to tell it what the content type is. And this particular way of formatting the data is called application/x www form URL encoded. You can stick this and you can Google this and you can find out exactly, all about the kind of structuring. So the way you see the way that this is structured, where you've got the field name equals the value, and then a little separator, field name equals value, and a separator. That format is XWW form URL encoded format. Okay, so I need to put this content type in here. Content type application XWW form URL encoded. So the server knows what type of content to expect. Okay, and then I need to put in my content. Let me just copy it. So this is the exact same content that I entered using the form. Okay, and I'm going to paste this in and hit enter, and you'll see what's happened is the server has responded. Same, HTTP 1.1 200, and to indicate everything is fine. It's given me the date, the server. Okay, it's given me transfer encoding. I don't know what this means. It said the content type is text HTML. Okay, and it's also told me the character set that this is. So this is a UTF-8 character set. And if I take this and I put this into this little index file and I refresh, you'll see I'm getting the same content back, it's just the image is not displaying. Okay, so that is just showing you basically what is happening behind the scenes, what your browser is doing, what messages your browser is sending to the website, and what responses are coming back from the website to your browser. Okay, and the one last thing that I'll do is I'll just show you for an example of getting an error back. Okay, so if I do this command that I've just done now, okay, this one here, okay, yeah, up all the way up to there. All right, ooh, yeah, like that. And if I put a star in here, the way that I've coded this little PHP page is if it sees a star, it's going to send a 500 error just to simulate a 500 error. And there you go. So the server has responded to me. It said HTTP version 1.1, response code 500, okay, internal server error, and it sent back the headers, okay. Right, so that's basically an example of a website sending you back a 500 error. So hopefully that's been communicated okay. So yeah, you guys can let me know what you think.